Welcome to Sinister States.
You ever get that feeling, late at night, when the world is quiet and the shadows in your room seem to stretch just a little bit longer than they should? Maybe you're lying in bed, scrolling through your phone, and you stumble across a story that makes your skin crawl. You tell yourself it's just fiction, just words on a screen, but something about it lingers. It's like a splinter in your mind, a whisper in the dark that refuses to be ignored. That's the feeling I'm chasing tonight. I've spent the last week diving into the deepest, darkest corners of the internet, searching for the most disturbing creepypastas ever written. Some of these stories are infamous, whispered about on forums and message boards, while others are hidden gems, passed around like forbidden secrets. I'm going to read them to you, one by one. But I have to warn you, don't listen alone. The first story I found was called The Smiling Man. It's one of those tales that seems simple at first, almost mundane, but the more you think about it, the more it gets under your skin. It starts with a man walking home late at night. The street's empty, the city asleep. He notices someone ahead of him, a man, tall and thin, dressed in a suit that looks a little too big for his frame. The stranger is dancing, moving in a way that's both graceful and grotesque, like a marionette with its strings tangled. He's smiling too, not a friendly smile, but something wide and unnatural, stretched too far across his face. The narrator tries to ignore him, to keep walking, but the smiling man follows, always keeping just out of reach, always dancing, always smiling. There's no violence, no jump scare, just the slow, creeping realization that something is terribly wrong. The story ends with the narrator running home, locking the door, and listening to the sound of laughter echoing in the night. It's the kind of story that makes you look over your shoulder when you're walking alone, the kind that makes you wonder what's lurking just out of sight. But that was just the beginning. The next story I read was called Normal Porn for Normal People. The title alone is enough to make you uneasy, but the content is even worse. It's written as a series of emails and forum posts, detailing the discovery of a mysterious website filled with bizarre, unsettling videos. At first, the videos seem harmless, just people eating, talking, doing mundane things. But as the narrator digs deeper, the videos become more disturbing. There's a sense of something sinister lurking beneath the surface, a feeling that the people in the videos are being watched, manipulated, controlled. The story never explains what's really going on, but it doesn't have to. The horror comes from the unknown, from the sense that there are things on the internet that should never be seen, things that can't be explained or understood. It's a reminder that sometimes the scariest stories are the ones that leave you with more questions than answers. After that, I stumbled across a story called Candle Cove. This one is written as a series of forum posts, with users reminiscing about a strange children's show they remember watching when they were kids. The show was low budget, with puppets and crude sets, but there was something off about it, something that none of them could quite put their finger on. As the conversation continues, the memories become more fragmented, more disturbing. One user remembers an episode where the puppets screamed for the entire runtime. Another recalls a character called the Skin Taker, a puppet made of children's skin. The final post is the most chilling of all. One user asks their mother about the show, and she replies, "You used to sit in front of the TV on static for 30 minutes. You had a big smile on your face the whole time." It's a story about memory, about the way our minds can twist and distort the past. But it's also a story about the things that hide in plain sight, the horrors that we invite into our homes without even realizing it. That I took a break after that one. I had to. There's something about these stories that gets to you, that makes you question what's real and what's not. But I couldn't stay away for long. The next story I read was called The Russian Sleep Experiment. You've probably heard of it. It's one of the most famous creepypastas out there. The story is set in the 1940s in a Soviet research facility where scientists are testing a new gas that keeps people awake for days on end. The subjects start out normal, but as the days go by, they become increasingly paranoid, violent, and deranged. They mutilate themselves, tear out their own organs, and beg to be put back in the chamber when the experiment is finally stopped. The final line of the story is the most haunting. When asked what they are, one of the subjects replies, "We are you. We are the madness that lurks within you all, begging to be free at every moment in your deepest animal mind." It's a story about the darkness inside us, about the thin line between sanity and madness, and it's one that sticks with you long after you've finished reading. But not all creepypastas are about monsters or madmen. Some of the most disturbing stories are the ones that feel the most real. Take Annecy's Goatman story, for example. It's a tale about a group of friends camping in the woods when they start to notice that something is off. There's an extra person in their group, someone who looks and acts like one of them, but isn't. The Goatman is a creature from Native American folklore, a shapeshifter that can mimic human voices and appearances. The story is told in a casual, conversational style, with the narrator describing the growing sense of unease as they realize that one of their friends isn't who they say they are. It's a story about paranoia, about the fear that the people around you aren't who you think they are, and it's all the more terrifying because it feels like something that could really happen. I kept reading, kept searching for stories that would push the boundaries of what I thought was possible. That's when I found The Expressionless. It's a short story, but it packs a punch. It's set in a hospital where a woman is brought in, covered in blood, with a blank, expressionless face. The doctors try to help her, but she doesn't respond. She just stares at them with empty eyes, her mouth twisted into a grotesque smile. When they try to sedate her, she attacks, killing several staff members before whispering, "I am God." The story is simple, almost like an urban legend, but it's the imagery that makes it so disturbing. The idea of something inhuman hiding behind a human face, something that can't be reasoned with or understood, is a fear that goes back to our earliest ancestors. By this point, I was starting to feel the weight of all these stories. It's one thing to read about monsters and madmen, but it's another thing entirely to feel like they're following you, lurking just out of sight. I started to see shadows moving in the corners of my room, started to hear whispers in the silence. But I couldn't stop. I had to keep going. The next story I read was called Abandoned by Disney. It's about an urban explorer who sneaks into an abandoned Disney resort, only to find that the place is hiding a dark secret. The story is filled with creepy details, costumes that move on their own, rooms filled with decaying mascots, and a final encounter with a character called Mickey Mouse, who isn't quite what he seems. The story ends with the narrator finding a sign that reads, "Abandoned by God." It's a story about the corruption of innocence, about the way even the happiest places can hide the darkest secrets. I started to notice a pattern in these stories. They all play on our deepest fears, the fear of the unknown, the fear of losing control, the fear that the world isn't as safe or as predictable as we want to believe. But they also tap into something more primal, something that goes beyond logic or reason. It's the fear that there are things out there that we can't understand, things that don't follow the rules of our world. That's what makes these stories so powerful, so disturbing. They force us to confront the possibility that the world is stranger, darker, and more dangerous than we ever imagined. The next story I read was called Psychosis. It's written as a series of journal entries, chronicling the narrator's descent into madness. At first, everything seems normal, but as the days go by, the narrator becomes increasingly paranoid, convinced that something is watching him, that the world outside his apartment isn't real. He starts to notice small inconsistencies, lights that flicker, voices that don't quite sound right, shadows that move on their own. The story ends with the narrator barricaded in his apartment, unsure if he's the last sane person in the world or if he's completely lost his mind. It's a story about isolation, about the way our minds can turn against us, and it's one of the most unsettling things I've ever read. I needed a break after that one. I turned off my computer, turned on all the lights, and tried to remind myself that these were just stories. But the fear lingered, a cold knot in my stomach that wouldn't go away. I started to wonder why these stories affected me so much, why they seemed to get under my skin in a way that movies or TV shows never could. I think it's because they're so personal, so intimate. When you read a creepypasta, you're alone with the story, alone with your thoughts. There's no one to reassure you, no one to tell you that it's just fiction. It's just you in the darkness. And sometimes, that's the scariest thing of all. But I wasn't done yet. There were still more stories to read, more horrors to uncover. The next one was called The Rake. It's about a creature that haunts people's dreams, a pale, emaciated figure with long claws and empty eyes. The story is told through a series of diary entries and witness accounts, each one more disturbing than the last. The rake appears at the foot of people's beds, whispering in the darkness, driving them to madness and despair. The story ends with the narrator realizing that the rake is real, that it's been watching him all along. It's a story about the fear of being watched, about the things that lurk in the shadows, and it's one that will make you think twice before turning off the lights. That I could keep going, but I think you get the idea. These stories are more than just words on a screen. They're windows into a world of fear and uncertainty, a world where anything is possible and nothing is safe. They remind us that the darkness is always waiting, just out of sight, and that sometimes the scariest monsters are the ones we can't see. That I wish I could say that after reading so many of these stories, I became numb to them. That the more I exposed myself to the darkness, the less it could touch me. But the truth is, the opposite happened. The more I read, the more I started to notice the little things, the way the wind rattled my window at night, the way the floorboards creaked when I was sure I was alone, the way my own reflection sometimes seemed to linger a moment too long in the mirror. It's like these stories plant seeds in your mind, and once they take root, they grow into something you can't quite control. The next story I want to share with you is called Gateway of the Mind. It's a story that's haunted me ever since I first read it, not because of any monster or ghost, but because of the questions it raises about the nature of consciousness and the afterlife. The premise is simple. A group of scientists in the 1980s attempt to isolate a human's mind from all sensory input, hoping to communicate with God. They find a willing subject, a man who's lost everything and is desperate for meaning. They seal him in a chamber, depriving him of sight, sound, touch, taste, and smell. At first, nothing happens, but as the days go by, the man begins to speak of voices, of visions, of things that no one else can see. He claims to have spoken with angels, with demons, with God himself. But the longer he stays in the chamber, the more his mind unravels. By the end, he's screaming, begging to be released, claiming that he's seen the true face of God, and that it's nothing but an endless void. The story ends with the scientists realizing that some doors are better left closed, that there are questions we're not meant to ask. It's a story that sticks with you, not because of any jump scares or gore, but because it forces you to confront the unknown. What happens when we die? Is there anything waiting for us on the other side? Or is it just nothingness? These are questions that haunt us all, whether we admit it or not. And that's what makes Gateway of the Mind so disturbing. It doesn't give you any answers, just more questions. After that, I found myself drawn to stories that blurred the line between reality and fiction. One of the most famous is 1999, a story about a man investigating a mysterious public access TV channel from his childhood. The channel, called Caledon Local 21, aired bizarre, unsettling shows, puppets with human teeth, a man in a bear costume who asked children to come play in his basement, and cryptic messages that seemed to be aimed directly at the narrator. As he digs deeper, he uncovers a series of disappearances and unsolved crimes linked to the channel. The story is told through a series of blog posts, emails, and recovered footage, creating a sense of authenticity that makes it all the more chilling. It's a story about the dangers of nostalgia, about the way our memories can betray us, and about the darkness that can hide behind even the most innocent of facades. What makes 1999 so effective is the way it uses the familiar to create fear. We all have memories of childhood shows, of things that seemed harmless at the time, but now feel strange and unsettling in hindsight. The story taps into that sense of unease, that feeling that something isn't quite right, and it never lets go. It's a reminder that sometimes the scariest things are the ones that hide in plain sight. That I kept searching, kept reading, driven by a need to understand why these stories affected me so deeply. That's when I came across The Portraits. It's a short story, but it's one that's been retold in countless variations. The premise is simple. A man is traveling and decides to spend the night in a small, remote inn. The room he's given is filled with portraits of people, all of them staring at him with expressions of anger and malice. He tries to sleep, but the eyes of the portraits seem to follow him, making him increasingly uneasy. When he wakes up in the morning, he realizes that there were no portraits, just windows. It's a classic twist, but it works because it plays on our fear of being watched, of being vulnerable when we're alone. It's a reminder that sometimes the things we fear most are the ones we can't see, the ones that are hiding just out of sight. It's a simple story, but it's one that lingers in your mind long after you've finished reading. The next story I read was The Showers. It's a longer story, one that takes its time building tension and atmosphere. The narrator is a college student who hears about an abandoned building in the middle of nowhere, a place called The Showers. The building is rumored to be haunted, and the narrator decides to investigate with a group of friends. As they explore the building, they find evidence of something terrible, bloodstains, strange symbols, and a sense of overwhelming dread. One by one, the group is separated, and the narrator finds himself alone, pursued by something that shouldn't exist. The story ends with the narrator barely escaping, but forever changed by what he's seen. What makes The Showers so effective is its pacing. It doesn't rush to the scares. Instead, it slowly builds a sense of unease, layering detail upon detail until the tension becomes unbearable. It's a story that rewards patience, that draws you in and refuses to let go. It's also a story about curiosity, about the dangers of seeking out the unknown. Sometimes, the things we're most drawn to are the ones that can hurt us the most. After reading The Showers, I found myself thinking about the role of curiosity in horror. So many of these stories start with someone looking for answers, someone who can't leave well enough alone. It's a theme that runs through all of the best creepypastas, the idea that there are things we're not meant to know, places we're not meant to go. It's a warning, a reminder that some mysteries are better left unsolved. The next story I want to share is The Seer of Possibilities. It's a story about a man who receives a mysterious email from someone calling themselves the Seer. The email contains a list of instructions, each one more bizarre and disturbing than the last. At first, the man ignores the messages, but as strange things begin to happen in his life, he starts to follow the instructions, desperate to understand what's happening. The story becomes a descent into madness, as the man realizes that the seer is manipulating him, controlling his every move. The final twist is that the seer is not a person, but but something far older and more powerful, a force that feeds on fear and chaos. What makes the Seer of Possibilities so disturbing is the sense of inevitability, the feeling that no matter what the narrator does, he's trapped in a game he can't win. It's a story about control, about the fear that our lives are not our own, that we're being manipulated by forces we can't understand. It's a fear that's all too real in the age of technology, where our every move is tracked and recorded, where privacy is an illusion. That I took a break after that one, went for a walk to clear my head. But even outside, in the bright light of day, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me, that I was being followed. It's amazing how these stories can get under your skin, how they can make you question the world around you. I started to wonder if maybe that was the point, not to scare us, but to make us more aware, more cautious, more alive. The next story I read was The Harbinger Experiment. It's a story about a secret government project designed to contact other dimensions. The experiment goes horribly wrong, unleashing something that can't be contained. The story is told through a series of journal entries and official reports, creating a sense of realism that makes the horror feel all the more immediate. The creature that's unleashed is never fully described, but its presence is felt in every line, every shadow. The story ends with the narrator realizing that the experiment has doomed not just the participants, but the entire world. What makes the Harbinger Experiment so effective is its use of ambiguity. The creature is never fully explained, never given a name or a form. It's a force of nature, something beyond human understanding. It's a reminder that there are things out there that we can't explain, things that don't fit into our neat little boxes. It's a story about the limits of human knowledge, about the dangers of playing with forces we can't control. After that, I found myself drawn to stories that dealt with the supernatural, with things that defy explanation. One of the most disturbing was the disappearance of Ashley, Kansas. It's written as a series of news reports and eyewitness accounts, detailing the sudden disappearance of an entire town. One night, the town of Ashley simply vanishes, no trace, no explanation. The only clue is a series of strange phone calls, voices that claim to be the missing townspeople begging for help. The story ends with the realization that the town has been swallowed by something, taken to a place that's not meant for humans. What makes the disappearance of Ashley, Kansas, so effective is its use of format. By presenting the story as a series of news reports and interviews, it creates a sense of authenticity, a feeling that this could really happen. It's a story about loss, about the things that can be taken from us without warning. It's a reminder that the world is full of mysteries, that not everything can be explained or understood. I kept reading, kept searching for stories that would push the boundaries of what I thought was possible. That's when I found the SCP Foundation. It's not a single story, but a collection of thousands of entries, each one detailing a different anomaly, creature, or phenomenon. The SCP Foundation is a fictional organization dedicated to containing and studying these anomalies, keeping them hidden from the public. Some of the entries are funny, some are tragic, but the best ones are deeply disturbing. There's SCP-173, a statue that can only move when you're not looking at it. There's SCP-096, a creature that will hunt down and kill anyone who sees its face. There's SCP-682, a reptile that can't be killed no matter what you do. What makes the SCP Foundation so effective is its world building. Each entry is written in the style of a scientific report, complete with containment procedures and experiment logs. It creates a sense of realism, a feeling that these things could really exist. It's a story about the unknown, about the things that lurk in the shadows, waiting to be discovered. By this point, I was starting to feel the weight of all these stories. It's one thing to read about monsters and madmen, but it's another thing entirely to feel like they're following you, lurking just out of sight. I started to see shadows moving in the corners of my room, started to hear whispers in the silence. But I couldn't stop. I had to keep going. That I think there's a reason why people keep coming back to these stories, even when they know they'll lose sleep over them. There's something addictive about the feeling of being scared, about testing the boundaries of your own comfort zone. It's like standing at the edge of a cliff and looking down, knowing you're safe, but still feeling that rush of adrenaline. Maybe it's a way of reminding ourselves that we're alive, that there are still things out there that can surprise us, unsettle us, make us feel something real. The next story I want to share is Been Drowned. It's one of the most famous creepypastas, and for good reason. The story starts with a college student buying a used copy of the video game, The Legend of Zelda: Majora's Mask. At first, everything seems normal, but soon the game starts to behave strangely. The save file is named Ben, and the game world is filled with glitches, distorted music, and cryptic messages. The protagonist begins to receive messages from Ben, who claims to be the spirit of a boy who drowned. The story unfolds through a series of blog posts and video clips, blurring the line between fiction and reality. What makes Been Drowned so effective is its use of multimedia. The story isn't just told through text, but through images, videos, and even hacked game files. It creates a sense of immersion, a feeling that the horror is bleeding into the real world. That I read through the story, I found myself checking my own computer, making sure there were no strange files or messages. It's a story that plays on our fear of technology, of the ways our devices can be used against us. It's also a story about guilt, about the things we can't escape no matter how hard we try. The final message from Ben is simple, but chilling. You shouldn't have done that. It's a warning, a reminder that some things are better left alone. After Been Drowned, I found myself drawn to stories that use technology as a source of horror. One of the most disturbing was Username 666. It's a short story, but it's stuck with me ever since I first read it. The premise is simple. A user discovers a mysterious YouTube channel with the username 666. The channel is filled with disturbing videos, glitches, screams, images that don't make sense. As the user tries to leave the channel, their computer becomes infected and the videos start to play on their own. The story ends with the user disappearing, their account taken over by something else. What makes Username 666 so effective is its use of the familiar. We all use YouTube. We all watch videos online. The idea that something as mundane as a video channel could be a gateway to something evil is deeply unsettling. It's a reminder that the things we take for granted can be turned against us, that the line between the virtual and the real is thinner than we think. I kept searching, kept reading, driven by a need to understand why these stories affected me so deeply. That's when I came across Smile Dog. It's a story about a cursed image, a photo of a dog with a human-like smile. Anyone who sees the image is driven to madness, plagued by nightmares and hallucinations. The story is told through a series of emails and interviews, as the narrator tries to uncover the truth behind the image. The final twist is that the image is real, and that by reading the story, you've already been exposed to it. What makes Smile Dog so disturbing is its use of suggestion. The story never shows you the image, but it describes it in such vivid detail that you can't help but imagine it. It's a story about the power of suggestion, about the way our minds can create monsters out of nothing. It's also a story about the dangers of curiosity, about the things we're not meant to see. After Smile Dog, I needed a break. I turned off my computer, turned on all the lights, and tried to remind myself that these were just stories. But the fear lingered, a cold knot in my stomach that wouldn't go away. I started to wonder why these stories affected me so much. why they seem to get under my skin in a way that movies or TV shows never could. I think it's because they're so personal, so intimate. When you read a creepypasta, you're alone with the story, alone with your thoughts. There's no one to reassure you, no one to tell you that it's just fiction. It's just you in the darkness, and sometimes that's the scariest thing of all. But I wasn't done yet. There were still more stories to read, more horrors to uncover. The next one was called Jeff the Killer. It's one of the most infamous creepypastas, and for good reason. The story is about a boy named Jeff who is bullied and abused, eventually snapping and becoming a killer. The most disturbing part of the story is the image that accompanies it, a pale, smiling face with empty eyes. The story is graphic, violent, and deeply unsettling. But what makes it so effective is the way it taps into our fear of the outsider, of the person who doesn't fit in. It's a story about transformation, about the way trauma can turn someone into a monster. After Jeff the Killer, I found myself drawn to stories that dealt with transformation, with the idea that anyone can become something else under the right circumstances. One of the most disturbing was the Holder series. It's a collection of stories, each one describing a different holder, a supernatural being that guards a powerful object. The stories are written as instructions, telling the reader how to find the holder, what to say, and what to do. Each story is more disturbing than the last, filled with graphic descriptions of torture, madness, and death. The final twist is that if you collect all the objects, you'll bring about the end of the world. What makes the Holder series so effective is its use of format. By presenting the stories as instructions, it creates a sense of involvement, a feeling that you're part of the story. It's a reminder that horror isn't just something you watch or read, it's something you experience. I kept reading, kept searching for stories that would push the boundaries of what I thought was possible. That's when I found the Diane House. It's a story about a man investigating the disappearance of his friend, only to discover a house that seems to move through time and space. The house is alive, feeding on the people who enter it. The story is told through a series of emails, blog posts, and journal entries, creating a sense of authenticity that makes the horror feel all the more immediate. The final twist is that the house is still out there, waiting for its next victim. What makes the Diane House so effective is its use of format. By presenting the story as a series of documents, it creates a sense of realism, a feeling that this could really happen. It's a story about the unknown, about the things that lurk in the shadows, waiting to be discovered. After the Diane House, I found myself thinking about the role of place in horror. So many of these stories are about locations, houses, towns, forests that are haunted or cursed. It's a reminder that horror isn't just about monsters or killers. It's about the places we inhabit, the spaces that shape our lives. Sometimes, the scariest thing isn't what's lurking in the dark, it's the darkness itself. The next story I read was Pen Pal. It's a novel-length creepypasta, told through a series of letters and memories. The narrator is a man trying to piece together the events of his childhood, only to discover that he was stalked by a stranger for years. The story is slow, methodical, and deeply unsettling, building a sense of dread that never lets up. The final twist is that the stalker is still out there, watching, waiting. What makes Pen Pal so effective is its use of memory. The story is about the way our minds can hide things from us, about the dangers of forgetting. It's a story about the past, about the things we can't escape no matter how hard we try. After Pen Pal, I needed another break. I went for a walk, tried to clear my head, but the fear lingered. It's amazing how these stories can get under your skin, how they can make you question the world around you. I started to wonder if maybe that was the point, not to scare us, but to make us more aware, more cautious, more alive. The next story I read was The Whistler. It's a story about a man who hears a strange whistling sound outside his window every night. At first, he thinks it's just the wind, but as the nights go by, the whistling gets closer, more insistent. He starts to see a figure standing in the shadows, watching him. The story ends with the man disappearing. The only clue: a series of recordings of the whistling sound. What makes the whistler so effective is its use of sound. The story describes the whistling in such vivid detail that you can almost hear it yourself. It's a story about the power of suggestion, about the way our minds can create monsters out of nothing. By this point, I was starting to feel the weight of all these stories. It's one thing to read about monsters and madmen, but it's another thing entirely to feel like they're following you, lurking just out of sight. I started to see shadows moving in the corners of my room, started to hear whispers in the silence. But I couldn't stop. I had to keep going. There's a strange comfort in the ritual of reading these stories, even as they unsettle you. Maybe it's the sense of control. You can always close the tab, turn off the screen, walk away. But the best creepypastas don't let you go so easily. They linger, like a half-remembered nightmare, waiting for the quiet moments when your guard is down. That's when they come back, whispering in the dark, reminding you that the world is bigger and stranger than you want to believe. The next story I want to share is Where Bad Kids Go. It's a short but powerful tale, told from the perspective of someone who grew up in Lebanon and remembers a disturbing children's show from their childhood. The show was meant to scare kids into behaving, but it went far beyond the usual moral lessons. Each episode ended with a shot of a door, accompanied by the words, "This is where bad kids go." Years later, the narrator tracks down the location where the show was filmed, only to find a small, windowless room filled with tiny bones and a camera pointed at a chair. The implication is clear, but never stated outright. It's a story that works because of what it doesn't say, because it lets your imagination fill in the blanks. That's something I've noticed about the most effective creepypastas. They don't spell everything out. They leave gaps, spaces for your mind to wander, to imagine things far worse than anything the author could describe. It's the power of suggestion, the fear of the unknown. Where Bad Kids Go is a perfect example of this. A story that haunts you not because of what it shows, but because of what it leaves unsaid. After that, I found myself drawn to stories that played with perception, that made you question what was real and what was imagined. One of the most unsettling was The Stairs and the Doorway. It's a story about a group of friends who go hiking in the woods and stumble across a staircase in the middle of nowhere. The staircase leads to a door, but there's nothing behind it, just more forest. The group becomes obsessed with the staircase, returning to it again and again, each time feeling more and more uneasy. Eventually, one of them opens the door and disappears, never to be seen again. The story ends with the narrator realizing that the staircase is still out there, waiting for its next victim. What makes The Stairs and the Doorway so effective is its use of the familiar. We've all seen abandoned buildings, strange structures in the woods, things that don't quite belong. The story taps into that sense of unease, that feeling that the world is full of mysteries we can't explain. It's a reminder that sometimes the scariest things are the ones that don't make sense, the ones that defy explanation. I kept reading, kept searching for stories that would push the boundaries of what I thought was possible. That's when I found The Keyhole. It's a short story, but it's one that's stuck with me ever since I first read it. The premise is simple. A man checks into a hotel and is told not to look through the keyhole of the room next to his. Of course, curiosity gets the better of him, and he peeks through the keyhole, seeing a pale woman standing in the room. The next day, he looks again and sees only red. When he asks the hotel staff about it, they tell him that a woman was murdered in that room years ago, and that her ghost still haunts it. The red he saw was her eye, looking back at him. What makes the keyhole so effective is its use of perspective. The story puts you in the narrator's shoes, makes you complicit in his curiosity. It's a reminder that sometimes the things we're not supposed to see are the ones that can hurt us the most. After the keyhole, I found myself thinking about the role of curiosity in horror. So many of these stories are about people who can't leave well enough alone, who have to know what's behind the door, what's lurking in the shadows. It's a theme that runs through all of the best creepypastas. The idea that there are things we're not meant to know, places we're not meant to go. It's a warning, a reminder that some mysteries are better left unsolved. The next story I read was The Backrooms. It's a story that's taken on a life of its own, spawning countless spin-offs, videos, and games. The premise is simple. If you're not careful, you can knocklip out of reality and end up in the backrooms, a seemingly endless maze of yellow, buzzing rooms that all look the same. The air is thick with the smell of old carpet, and the fluorescent lights hum overhead. There are things in the backrooms, things that don't want you to leave. The story is told in a matter-of-fact tone, as if it's just another urban legend, but the imagery is so vivid, so unsettling, that it sticks with you long after you've finished reading. What makes The Backrooms so effective is its use of liminality, the idea of being stuck in a place that's not quite one thing or another. We've all been in empty offices, abandoned buildings, places that feel off somehow. The story taps into that sense of unease, that feeling that you don't belong, that you're not supposed to be there. It's a reminder that sometimes the scariest places are the ones that feel almost normal. After The Backrooms, I needed a break. I turned off my computer, turned on all the lights, and tried to remind myself that these were just stories. But the fear lingered, a cold knot in my stomach that wouldn't go away. I started to wonder why these stories affected me so much, why they seemed to get under my skin in a way that movies or TV shows never could. I think it's because they're so personal, so intimate. When you read a creepypasta, you're alone with the story, alone with your thoughts. There's no one to reassure you, no one to tell you that it's just fiction. It's just you in the darkness. And sometimes, that's the scariest thing of all. But I wasn't done yet. There were still more stories to read, more horrors to uncover. The next one was called The Gristers. It's a story about a man who starts seeing strange, shadowy figures out of the corner of his eye. At first, he thinks it's just his imagination, but as the days go by, the figures become more and more real. They start to follow him, to whisper his name, to appear in his dreams. The story ends with the man disappearing, the only clue a series of frantic journal entries describing the Gristers closing in. What makes the Gristers so effective is its use of paranoia. The story describes the feeling of being watched, of being hunted, in such vivid detail that you can't help but feel it yourself. It's a story about the power of suggestion, about the way our minds can create monsters out of nothing. After the Gristers, I found myself drawn to stories that dealt with the supernatural, with things that defy explanation. One of the most disturbing was The Song and Dance Man. It's a story about a small town where children start disappearing, only to return changed, empty, hollow, no longer themselves. The townspeople trace the disappearances to a mysterious figure known as the Song and Dance Man, who appears at the edge of town, playing a haunting melody on his violin. The story is told through a series of interviews and diary entries, creating a sense of authenticity that makes the horror feel all the more immediate. The final twist is that the Song and Dance Man is not human, but something far older and more powerful, a force that feeds on fear and sorrow. What makes the Song and Dance Man so effective is its use of folklore. The story feels like an old legend, something passed down through generations. It's a reminder that horror isn't just about monsters or killers. It's about the stories we tell ourselves, the myths we create to explain the unexplainable. By this point, I was starting to feel the weight of all these stories. It's one thing to read about monsters and madmen, but it's another thing entirely to feel like they're following you, lurking just out of sight. I started to see shadows moving in the corners of my room, started to hear whispers in the silence. But I couldn't stop. I had to keep going. It's strange, the way fear can become a companion. After a while, you start to expect it, to look for it in the quiet moments. You find yourself glancing at the window, checking the locks, listening for sounds that shouldn't be there. It's not that you want to be scared, exactly. It's more that you want to feel something, to know that you're still alive. That's the paradox of horror. It terrifies you, but it also makes you feel more real, more present, more awake. The next story I want to share is the disappearance of Eliza Lamb. This one is based on a real event, but it's been transformed by the internet into something even stranger and more unsettling. Eliza Lamb was a young woman who disappeared while staying at the Cecil Hotel in Los Angeles. Security footage showed her acting strangely in the hotel elevator, pressing buttons, peering out into the hallway, hiding in the corner. Her body was later found in the hotel's water tank, and no one could explain how she got there. The official story is tragic enough, but the creepypasta versions go further, suggesting that she was possessed, that she was being chased by something only she could see, that the hotel itself is a kind of gateway to another world. The story is a reminder that sometimes the scariest mysteries are the ones that are never solved. What makes the Eliza Lamb story so effective is its ambiguity. There are no easy answers, no clear explanations. It's a story that invites speculation, that encourages you to fill in the blanks with your own fears. It's a reminder that the world is full of mysteries, that not everything can be explained or understood. After that, I found myself drawn to stories that blurred the line between reality and fiction. One of the most famous is Ted the Caver. It's a story told through a series of blog posts, chronicling the adventures of a man named Ted as he explores a mysterious cave. At first, the posts are lighthearted, filled with jokes and photos of the cave's strange formations. But as Ted and his friends go deeper, they start to experience strange phenomena, unexplained noises, sudden drops in temperature, feelings of being watched. The posts become more frantic, more desperate, as Ted realizes that something is following them, something that doesn't want them to leave. The story ends abruptly, with Ted promising to post an update that never comes. What makes Ted the Caver so effective is its use of format. By presenting the story as a series of real-time updates, it creates a sense of immediacy, a feeling that you're experiencing the events alongside the narrator. It's a story about curiosity, about the dangers of seeking out the unknown. Sometimes, the things we're most drawn to are the ones that can hurt us the most. I kept reading, kept searching for stories that would push the boundaries of what I thought was possible. That's when I found The No-End House. It's a story about a haunted house that promises to give you $500 if you can make it through all 9 rooms. Each room is more disturbing than the last, filled with illusions, monsters, and psychological torment. The protagonist soon realizes that the house is alive, that it feeds on fear, and that there may be no way out. The story is a descent into madness, a journey through a nightmare that never ends. What makes The No-End House so effective is its use of escalation. Each room is worse than the last, each challenge more terrifying. It's a story about endurance, about the limits of human fear. It's also a story about the dangers of greed, about the price we're willing to pay for a chance at something better. After The No-End House, I found myself thinking about the role of endurance in horror. So many of these stories are about people who are pushed to their limits, who have to keep going even when they want to give up. It's a theme that runs through all of the best creepypastas, the idea that survival is not just about strength, but about willpower, about the ability to keep moving forward even when everything seems hopeless. The next story I read was The Baraska. It's a novel-length creepypasta, told through the eyes of a young man named Sam as he investigates a series of disappearances in his small town. The story is slow, methodical, and deeply unsettling, building a sense of dread that never lets up. The final twist is that the disappearances are linked to a dark secret hidden in the town's history, a secret that threatens to destroy everyone who uncovers it. What makes The Baraska so effective is its use of setting. The story is rooted in a specific place, a small town with its own rules and secrets. It's a reminder that horror isn't just about monsters or killers. It's about the places we inhabit, the communities we build, the things we hide from ourselves and each other. After The Baraska, I needed another break. I went for a walk, tried to clear my head, but the fear lingered. It's amazing how these stories can get under your skin, how they can make you question the world around you. I started to wonder if maybe that was the point, not to scare us, but to make us more aware, more cautious, more alive. The next story I read was The Autopilot. It's a short story, but it's one that stuck with me ever since I first read it. The premise is simple. A man is driving his usual route to work when he suddenly realizes he can't remember the last few minutes. He's been on autopilot, going through the motions without thinking. When he gets home, he finds a note from his wife, asking him to check on their daughter. He goes to her room and finds her dead, the victim of a tragic accident. The story ends with the man realizing that he's been living on autopilot for years, that he's missed the most important moments of his life. What makes the autopilot so effective is its use of the mundane. We've all experienced moments of forgetfulness, times when we go through the motions without really thinking. The story taps into that sense of unease, that fear that we're missing something important, that we're not really living our lives. After The Autopilot, I found myself drawn to stories that dealt with loss, with the things we can't get back. One of the most disturbing was the strangest security tape I've ever seen. It's a story about a security guard who discovers a tape that shows impossible events, people disappearing, objects moving on their own, time looping in on itself. The guard becomes obsessed with the tape, watching it over and over, trying to make sense of what he's seeing. The story ends with the guard disappearing, the only clue a series of frantic notes describing the events on the tape. What makes the strangest security tape I've ever seen so effective is its use of ambiguity. The story never explains what's happening, never gives you any answers. It's a story that invites speculation, that encourages you to fill in the blanks with your own fears. By this point, I was starting to feel the weight of all these stories. It's one thing to read about monsters and madmen, but it's another thing entirely to feel like they're following you, lurking just out of sight. I started to see shadows moving in the corners of my room, started to hear whispers in the silence. But I couldn't stop. I had to keep going. The next story I read was The Quiet Room. It's a story about a psychiatric hospital with a room that no one is allowed to enter. The staff call it the quiet room, and they warn the patients to stay away. One night, a patient sneaks into the room and finds it empty, except for a single chair and a mirror. When he looks into the mirror, he sees himself, but not quite. The reflection smiles, even when he doesn't, and begins to speak in a voice that isn't his own. The story ends with the patient being found catatonic, unable to speak or move, his eyes fixed on something only he can see. What makes The Quiet Room so effective is its use of isolation. The story taps into our fear of being alone, of being cut off from the world. It's a reminder that sometimes the scariest monsters are the ones inside our own minds. After The Quiet Room, I found myself thinking about the role of isolation in horror. So many of these stories are about people who are alone, who have no one to turn to. It's a theme that runs through all of the best creepypastas, The idea that we're all alone in the end, that no one can save us from ourselves. The last story I want to share is The Last Broadcast. It's a story about a radio station that continues to broadcast long after the world has ended. The DJ plays music, reads the news, and takes calls from listeners who may or may not be real. The story is told through a series of transcripts, creating a sense of authenticity that makes the horror feel all the more immediate. The final twist is that the DJ is alone, broadcasting to an empty world, his voice echoing into the void. What makes The Last Broadcast so effective is its use of atmosphere. The story creates a sense of loneliness, of emptiness, that's more terrifying than any monster or ghost. It's a reminder that sometimes the scariest thing isn't what's out there, it's what's missing, what's been lost. And so, after reading all these stories, after diving into the darkest corners of the internet, I'm left with a strange sense of peace. Yes, these stories are disturbing. Yes, they'll keep you up at night, make you question the world around you, make you wonder what's lurking in the shadows. But they also remind you that you're alive, that you can still feel fear, that you can still be surprised. In a world that's often predictable and safe, that's a gift.so if you've made it this far. If you've listened to these stories and felt that chill run down your spine, know that you're not alone. We all have our fears, our doubts, our questions. We all wonder what's out there, waiting for us in the dark. And maybe, just maybe, that's what makes us human. There's something almost ritualistic about the way we seek out fear. We gather around screens instead of campfires, but the impulse is the same. To share stories, to test the boundaries of what we can handle, to remind ourselves that the world is still full of mysteries. Maybe that's why creepypastas have become such a phenomenon. They're not just stories, they're experiences, invitations to step outside the safe, well-lit paths of everyday life and wander into the unknown. As I close this journey through the most disturbing creepypastas ever written, I can't help but reflect on what I've learned, not just about horror, but about myself. Each story is a mirror, reflecting our deepest anxieties and desires. Some of them are obvious: the fear of death, of pain, of losing control. Others are more subtle: the fear of being forgotten, of being alone, of never truly understanding the world around us. The best creepypastas don't just scare us, they make us think, make us question, make us feel. I think about the stories that have stuck with me the most. The ones that left me staring at the ceiling long after I finished reading, wondering if maybe, just maybe, there's some truth to them. Stories like Candle Cove, with its haunting nostalgia and the suggestion that our memories can't always be trusted. Or The Russian Sleep Experiment, with its exploration of the darkness that lurks within us all. Or The Backrooms, with its endless, buzzing corridors and the sense that escape is impossible. But it's not just the stories themselves, it's the way they're told. The best creepypastas use contrast to their advantage, lulling you into a false sense of security before pulling the rug out from under you. They start with the familiar, a childhood memory, a routine drive, a friendly face, and then twist it, revealing the horror that was hiding there all along. The transitions are smooth, almost invisible, so that by the time you realize something is wrong, it's already too late. That's what makes them so effective, so unforgettable. And then there's the community. Creepypastas aren't just written, they're shared, discussed, dissected. Every comment, every theory, every retelling adds another layer to the myth. The stories grow and change, taking on a life of their own. In a way, that's the scariest part of all. The idea that a story can escape its creator, can become something bigger, something uncontrollable. It's a reminder that fear is contagious, that it spreads from person to person, generation to generation. As I finish this script, I realize that I'm not the same person I was when I started. I've seen things I can't unsee, imagined horrors that will stay with me for a long time. But I've also gained a new appreciation for the power of storytelling, for the way a few well-chosen words can change the way we see the world. Maybe that's the real magic of creepypastas, not the monsters or the ghosts, but the way they bring us together, the way they remind us that we're all afraid of something. So, if you're still listening, if you've made it through all these stories without turning on the lights or checking the locks, I salute you. You're braver than most. But remember, the stories don't end when the video does. They linger, waiting for the quiet moments, for the darkness to settle in. And when you least expect it, they'll come back, whispering in your ear, reminding you that the world is stranger and scarier than you ever imagined. Maybe tonight, when you turn off the lights and settle into bed, you'll remember something you heard here. Maybe you'll hear a strange noise, or catch a glimpse of movement in the corner of your eye. Maybe you'll wonder, just for a moment, if the stories are true. And maybe, just maybe, you'll find yourself reaching for your phone, searching for another story, another thrill, another reason to believe. Because that's what we do, isn't it? We chase the darkness, even as we fear it. We tell ourselves it's just for fun, just a way to pass the time. But deep down, we know the truth. We need these stories. We need the fear, the uncertainty, the reminder that we're not alone in the dark. It's what makes us human. It's what keeps us coming back, night after night, story after story. So, thank you for joining me on this journey. Thank you for listening, for daring to face the darkness with me. And remember, don't listen alone, because you never know what might be waiting for you, just out of sight, just beyond the edge of the light. Sleep well, if you can.